I married the man I loved, but I didn't realize I was also marrying his mother's control. From day one, she tried to rewrite my life, erasing my name from our home, spreading lies, turning his own family against me. I fought to protect my marriage, but the harder I tried, the more she pushed. Until one day, Daniel finally saw the truth and chose me. That was the moment everything changed. This isn't just a story about love or betrayal. It's about finding your voice when someone tries to silence it and reclaiming the life they tried to steal. I remember the smell of lavender candles and burnt toast the morning everything changed. It was a Sunday, the kind of quiet morning I used to love. Sunlight spilling through our kitchen blinds, the hum of the dishwasher, Daniel humming somewhere in the hallway. I was standing barefoot by the counter, still wearing the oversized t-shirt I slept in, when I heard the doorbell. One ring, two, then a sharp, impatient knock. I froze because I already knew who it was. Only one person in my life rang twice and knocked like she owned the place. My mother-in-law, Eleanor. She never called before showing up. She didn't need to, at least in her mind. The house was her son's, her family's. I was just the wife, the unwanted accessory who somehow slipped through the cracks and made herself comfortable. I wiped my hands on a towel, forced a polite smile, and opened the door. There she was. Perfectly pressed white slacks, pearls glinting in the morning light, a silver folder tucked under her arm like a weapon. "Good morning, Rachel," she said, her tone already rehearsed. "Is Daniel up?" She didn't even wait for me to answer before stepping inside, her perfume heavy and sweet, like power disguised as kindness. The folder hit the dining table with a slap that made me jump. Inside, a neat stack of documents, some typed, some handwritten in her immaculate cursive. "What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A family matter," she replied smoothly. "Something that needs to be handled before Thanksgiving." My eyes scanned the first page and my stomach dropped. It was a property transfer form for the lake house Daniel and I had just bought 6 months ago, our first real home together. The name on the title was supposed to be both of ours, but in her version, my name was missing. Completely gone. "You must be kidding," I said, looking up at her. But Eleanor just smiled like she was doing me a favor. "Oh, sweetie," she said in that syrupy tone that made my skin crawl. "You know this house is part of Daniel's inheritance. It should stay in the family. We don't want any confusion later on." Confusion. That's what she called erasing me. I could feel the heat rise behind my eyes, but I kept my face calm. "You can leave now," I said quietly. "This isn't your decision." She tilted her head, the pearls at her throat catching the light. "Do you think you've earned this life?" she asked softly, her voice suddenly sharp. "You come from nothing, Rachel. I've seen your parents' house. You should be grateful my son even looked at you." I felt something inside me twist. Anger, humiliation, maybe both, but I didn't let her see it. "You need to leave," I repeated, my voice colder this time. She stared at me for a long second, then smirked. "You'll regret talking to me like that." And with that, she picked up her purse, smoothed her blouse, and walked out. When Daniel came home from the grocery store an hour later, I was still sitting at the table staring at the folder. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened, setting the bags down on the counter. "Hey, babe," he said cheerful. "I got that new coffee you like." I didn't answer. I just slid the folder toward him. The color drained from his face the moment he saw the papers. "What the hell is this?" he asked, flipping through them. "Your mother," I said flatly. "She came by. She wants me off the title." Daniel sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'll handle it." I laughed, a small, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You said that last time, and the time before that." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when he saw my face. "Rachel," he said gently, "she's just complicated." "She's manipulative," I corrected. And you let her get away with it." For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me, eyes soft but tired. "I'll fix this," he said finally, his voice low. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just another fight with Eleanor. This was something deeper. A test. A line drawn across our marriage that we couldn't keep stepping over forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to Daniel's breathing beside me. The quiet rhythm that used to comfort me now only made my chest feel heavier. Every memory of Eleanor replayed in my head like an old movie I couldn't shut off. The backhanded compliments at our wedding. "You look lovely," though I always pictured Daniel with someone taller. The way she'd show up unannounced and rearrange my kitchen cabinets for efficiency. Or the time she told my coworkers at a dinner party that I was very ambitious for someone with an English degree. It wasn't just dislike, it was a campaign. A slow, methodical erosion of who I was in her eyes, and worse, in Daniel's. I turned to look at him sleeping, his face soft in the moonlight, and I wondered how much he really saw. Did he understand what it felt like to constantly prove your worth in a house you paid for? To love someone whose loyalty was divided between his wife and the woman who raised him? I knew he loved me. That wasn't the problem. The problem was, he still felt love could fix this. But I was starting to realize something. Love isn't enough when someone else keeps rewriting the story of your life. 2 days later, the situation exploded. I came home from work early, hoping to surprise Daniel with dinner, but instead I walked into chaos. Eleanor was in the living room again, holding a stack of framed photos. My photos. She was taking them off the wall. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp. She turned, startled but not ashamed. "These are family photos," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "You're family. So am I." She smiled, a thin, cruel thing. Not for long. On the coffee table sat another envelope, this one addressed to Daniel and Rachel Turner, our full names typed neatly across the front. I picked it up with trembling hands, already knowing I wouldn't like what I found. Inside were annulment papers. Not divorce. Annulment. As if our marriage never existed. I stared at them in disbelief. "You had these printed? Why?" "Because I won't watch my son throw away his future on you," she said, her voice cold and final. "You've turned him into a house husband. He used to be driven. Now he bakes bread." I wanted to scream, to tell her that Daniel chose this life, that he was happy for the first time in years, but the words caught in my throat. And maybe that was the moment I finally saw her clearly, not as the polished matriarch everyone else saw, but as a woman terrified of losing control. "You can't erase me," I said quietly. "I already did." And she walked past me like I was air. That night, Daniel found me sitting on the floor, the annulment papers crumpled in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just told him everything. Every word she'd said. Every visit she'd made while he wasn't home. Every manipulation I'd stayed silent about because I didn't want to make him choose. When I finally finished, the room felt unbearably still. Daniel didn't speak for a long time. Then, without a word, he took the papers from my hand and tore them clean in half. "She doesn't get to do this anymore," he said quietly. "Not to you, not to us." But as I looked at him, I saw the pain in his eyes, the conflict that still lingered beneath his promise. Because Eleanor wasn't just anyone. She was his mother. And I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, Daniel was up before me. I heard him moving around the kitchen, opening drawers, the faint clink of dishes. When I finally came out, the air felt charged, like a thunderstorm waiting to break. He was standing by the counter, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. She's been calling since 6, he said quietly. I haven't answered. I poured myself coffee, the silence stretching between us. I could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us both. Finally, he looked at me. I'm going over there, he said. I need to talk to her face to face. My stomach dropped. Daniel, no. She'll twist it like she always does. He shook his head. Not this time. I need her to hear me. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I wanted to stop him, to tell him that confronting her would only make it worse, but I also knew this wasn't mine to fight anymore. For years, I had carried the weight of his mother's disapproval alone. Maybe now it was time he felt some of it too. When he left, I stood by the window watching his car disappear down the street, a dull ache building behind my ribs. The house was too quiet. I tried to distract myself, folded laundry, wiped the counters, even started reorganizing the bookshelf. But my mind kept circling back to the image of Eleanor's face when Daniel told her he knew. I imagined her shock first, then denial, and finally that familiar cold fury she always reserved for people who didn't bend to her rules. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. It's bad. I'll explain later. My hands went cold. I typed back, "Do you want me to come?" But there was no reply. I sat there for nearly an hour, the coffee in my mug long gone cold, before I heard the door open. Daniel came in looking exhausted, his hair disheveled, his jaw tight, a haunted look in his eyes. "Well," he said, tossing his keys onto the table, "she didn't take it well." I didn't need to ask what that meant. I could tell by the way his shoulders slumped, by the quiet tremor in his voice. "She told me I'm making the biggest mistake of my life," he continued, "that you've brainwashed me, that I've forgotten who I am." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar sting of tears. "And what did you say?" I whispered. He hesitated. "He told her she's wrong," he said finally. "But Rachel, she's not going to let this go." That night, Daniel barely spoke. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor while I brushed my hair in the mirror. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't the comfortable kind that we used to share after long days. It was heavy, brittle, like glass stretched too thin. "She called Jeremy," he said suddenly. "My brother. She told him you've been trying to separate me from the family." I turned to face him. "What?" He said she was crying, said she told everyone you threatened to leave me if I didn't cut her off. I set the brush down slowly. "That's not true." "I know," he said quickly, standing up. "But you know how she is. She's already spinning it." I sank on the edge of the bed, my chest tightening. "So now I'm the villain." He ran a hand through his hair. "She's playing the victim. It's what she does." I stared at the floor, my reflection flickering in the mirror across from us. "Daniel, I can't keep doing this. Living like every boundary we set is just another challenge for her to break." He sat beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know." "Do you?" I asked. "Because every time she crosses a line, you patch it up. You tell her it's okay, that she didn't mean it, and then she does it again and again." He looked at me, eyes glistening. "She's my mother," he said helplessly, "and I'm your wife." The words hung there, sharp and undeniable. For the first time, I saw it hit him, really hit him, that he couldn't keep both worlds standing. A week passed. The silence from Eleanor was deceptive. It wasn't peace, it was plotting. I should have known something was coming when Daniel's Aunt Linda called out of nowhere. "Rachel, honey," she said sweetly, "I just wanted to ask, are you two okay? Eleanor's been so upset. She said you've been having some kind of crisis." I almost laughed. Crisis. That was her word for me standing up for myself. "We're fine," I said tightly, "just setting some boundaries." There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. "You know how she gets," Linda said gently. "Try not to take it personally." I bit back a bitter smile. That's what everyone always said about Eleanor. She means well, she just worries. She's old-fashioned. But no one ever saw the damage left behind her good intentions. No one saw how every word she said burrowed under your skin until you started doubting your own worth. I hung up, my hands trembling, and when Daniel came home later, I told him everything. She's turning your whole family against me, I said, and if you don't stop her now, there won't be anything left to save. He listened quietly, then nodded. You're right. It's time we take control. I didn't expect what came next. The following Sunday, Daniel suggested we invite his family over. For dinner, he said, all of them. His eyes clear and determined. Even her. My heart skipped. You're serious? He nodded. If she wants to spread lies, let's give everyone the truth. Together. Part of me wanted to say no, to run from the inevitable explosion. But another part, the tired, angry, wounded part, wanted closure. So I agreed. That entire week, the tension in our house was unbearable. We cleaned, cooked, pretended everything was normal, but both of us knew what this dinner really was, a reckoning. Sunday came fast. By 6, the table was set. The roast chicken smelled perfect, candles flickered, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The doorbell rang. First, Jeremy and his wife, then Linda, and finally, Eleanor, last as always, making an entrance. She walked in smiling like nothing was wrong, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. Rachel, she said sweetly, lovely to see you. I forced a smile. Eleanor. We ate in stiff politeness for 20 minutes. Every bite felt heavy. Then Daniel set down his fork. Mom, we need to talk. The room stilled. She looked up, feigning innocence. Of course, dear. Stop lying to everyone about Rachel, he said flatly. She didn't threaten me. She didn't try to separate me from anyone. You're the one creating distance. Eleanor froze, her face paling, eyes darting between us and the others. Daniel, that's not fair. No, he cut her off, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. What's not fair is watching you try to ruin the one person who's always been in my corner. The table was silent. Even Jeremy looked stunned. She's been paying your bills, Daniel continued, his tone calm but lethal. Your utilities, your overdrafts, even the down payment on your condo. You've been living off her generosity while calling her ungrateful. The silence that followed was suffocating. Eleanor's mouth opened, but no words came. Jeremy stared at her, wide-eyed. Linda looked away. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. You're lying, Eleanor finally whispered, but her voice cracked. You can ask the bank, he said coldly. You'll see who the checks were signed by. For the first time, Eleanor's mask slipped. Her posture deflated, her hands trembled slightly. She looked at me, not with anger this time, but confusion, disbelief. Why would you do that? Why would you pay for me? I swallowed hard, because that's what family does. At least that's what I thought. She blinked, eyes glistening. For a fleeting second, she looked small, human. But then her face hardened again. You're turning him against me, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Daniel shook his head. No, Mom, you did that yourself. And that was the moment everything broke. She pushed back her chair, her pearl bracelet caught the candlelight. I can't believe this, she hissed. My own son. Her gaze cut to me. You've poisoned him. Then without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out. The door slammed so hard that the walls shook. No one moved for a long time. Finally, Jeremy spoke, his voice soft. I didn't know, he said to me. None of us did. I nodded, too tired to speak. The dinner was over. The war, I thought, was too. But as I would learn later, Eleanor wasn't finished. Not yet. For a week after that dinner, the house felt like a battlefield after the smoke cleared. Quiet, wrecked, and uncertain. Daniel and I didn't talk much, not because we were angry at each other, but because neither of us knew what came next. He was hurt in ways I couldn't fix. I could see it in the way he moved, slower, heavier, like every breath was a negotiation. The woman who raised him had become the person he couldn't recognize. And me, I was exhausted too. I thought that dinner would be the end of it, the moment we'd finally find peace. But peace doesn't come that easily when someone like Eleanor is involved. She didn't call, she didn't show up, but the silence she left behind wasn't relief. It was strategy. It was the kind of stillness before a storm that you feel before you see it. I tried to convince myself it was over, but deep down, I knew her too well. Eleanor wasn't the kind of woman who lost quietly. The storm came on a Wednesday. I was at work when my boss called me into his office. His expression was tight, polite in that corporate way that meant bad news. "Rachel," he said, gesturing for me to sit, "I received some concerning emails this morning." I frowned. "Emails?" He turned his monitor toward me. My stomach turned cold. There, on the screen, were screenshots. Private texts between Daniel and I taken out of context, twisted to look ugly. There were also copies of bank statements, highlighting every time I transferred money to Eleanor. And at the end, a message written from an anonymous address. "Thought you should know the kind of person representing your company. Not exactly trustworthy, is she?" I didn't have to guess who sent it. The phrasing, the precision, it was pure Eleanor. My boss sighed. "I'm not saying I believe any of this," he said carefully, "but HR needs to look into it. For now, I think it's best if you take a few days off." My mouth went dry. "You're suspending me?" He nodded sympathetically, "Just until this clears up." When I got home that evening, Daniel was waiting on the porch, his phone clutched in his hand. "Shh, Mom called me," he said before I could even speak. "She says she's sorry." I almost laughed. "Sorry?" He nodded slowly. "She said she knows she went too far, that she just wants to talk." My pulse started to race. "Daniel," I said carefully, "she's the reason I just got suspended." He blinked. "What?" I told him everything, the emails, the fake messages, the screenshots. His face went pale. "You think she—" "I know she did," I said sharply. "Who else would have access to those conversations? I sent her those bank statements, remember? To show her the help we gave." He rubbed his forehead, pacing. "I'll talk to her." I grabbed his arm. "No, Daniel, not this time. Talking is what got us here." He looked at me helplessly. "She's still my mother." I let go of him. "And I'm still your wife," I said quietly. "And she's trying to destroy my life." For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two people who loved each other but stood on opposite sides of a widening crack. Then he walked away, out the door and into the night. He didn't come home until after midnight. I was sitting in the dark, waiting. When he walked in, his face said everything. "You saw her," I said flatly. He nodded. "And?" He sank onto the couch, eyes hollow. "She admitted it." My throat tightened. "She admitted it?" "She said she didn't mean for it to go that far," he muttered bitterly, "that she just wanted to make a point." He looked at me, his voice breaking. "She thought if she could show you weren't as perfect as everyone thought, I'd finally come to my senses." I stared at him stunned. "She ruined my job to make a point?" He nodded slowly. "She thinks she's protecting me." The words made me feel physically ill. I stood up, shaking my head. "No, Daniel, she's protecting her control. That's all she's ever cared about." He didn't argue. He just buried his face in his hands. And for the first time, I saw him cry. Quietly, brokenly. Like a man realizing the person he loved most had turned into a stranger. I knelt beside him, placed my hand over his. I whispered, "You can't save her. And if you try, you'll lose us both." He didn't answer, but the silence between us wasn't angry this time. It was something else. Grief, maybe. The sound of a cord snapping between a mother and a son. The next morning, Daniel made a decision I never thought he'd make. He capped a small suitcase, not for him, but for her. He said, "She's moving." I called Jeremy. She's staying with him for a while. I stood there stunned. She agreed? He nodded. She didn't have a choice. I told her if she ever contacted you again, I'd file a restraining order. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, sharp, firm, final. I walked over, wrapping my arms around him. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He exhaled. "No," he admitted, "but maybe that's a good start." That day we drove to her house together. She didn't say a word when we arrived, just glared at me from the doorway as Daniel carried her things to the car. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling, but even in that moment, I could see the anger simmering underneath. When Daniel loaded the last bag, she looked at him and said quietly, "She'll never love you like I do." He paused, then turned to her. "Good, because her love doesn't come with conditions." We drove home in silence. The sun was setting, the sky washed in orange and violet. For the first time in months, I felt something like air in my lungs again. Freedom didn't feel triumphant. It felt raw, shaky, like learning how to breathe again after holding your breath for too long. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch with a bottle of wine, not saying much, just watching the stars appear one by one. He reached from my hand, his thumb brushing over my wedding ring. Finally, he said, "You know what hurts most? She made me believe love was supposed to hurt." I squeezed his hand gently. I whispered, "Let's promise each other something. No more love that hurts." He nodded, his eyes meeting mine, tired but certain. For the first time, it felt like we were on the same side of the line. And as the night deepened, I realized something I hadn't before. Sometimes families aren't built by blood or tradition or even forgiveness. Sometimes they're built by survival, by two people choosing each other over the ghosts that tried to tear them apart.
It's strange how peace doesn't come with silence. It comes with acceptance. 3 weeks passed after that dinner, and our house finally felt like ours again. No more calls at dawn, no more unexpected knocks at the door, no more walking on eggshells. The air was lighter, cleaner. But peace always comes with an ache, because something has to be broken before you can rebuild it. And for Daniel, that something was his mother. He didn't say much at first. He went to work, came home, tried to act normal, but there was a heaviness in his movements I hadn't seen before. He'd sit at the edge of the bed at night, scrolling through old photos of his family, birthdays, holidays, their perfect smiles frozen in time. One night he looked up at me and said quietly, "You know what the hardest part is? Realizing she'll never say sorry. Not because she can't, but because she doesn't think she did anything wrong." I reached for his hand. "Maybe sorry isn't the point anymore," I said softly. "Maybe it's just letting go." But letting go isn't simple. It's not a clean break. It's a slow unraveling. A week later, we got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew her handwriting instantly. Inside was a folded note and a small photograph of Daniel as a baby. The note read, "I hope someday you understand that everything I did was out of love. Mothers make mistakes too, but sons should forgive them." I stared at those words for a long time. There was no apology, no accountability, just another twist of guilt wrapped in nostalgia. I left it on Daniel's nightstand without saying a word. The next morning, it was gone. He never mentioned it. Neither did I. Around that time, something in me began to shift. For years, my world had revolved around surviving Eleanor's storms, avoiding them, explaining them, cleaning up after them. I didn't realize how much space she took up in my head until she wasn't there anymore. One morning, I stood in our kitchen, the same one where it all began, and for the first time in months, I felt still. The sunlight hit the counter, the coffee machine hummed, and the smell of lavender candles filled the air. I realized I'd been living in defense mode for so long that I'd forgotten how to just be. That afternoon, I walked down to the lake behind our house. The water was calm, a mirror of the sky above it. I sat on the dock and let my feet dangle just above the surface. I thought about everything that had happened, the fights, the tears, the moments where I almost walked away. And I thought about Daniel, how hard he was trying to hold both love and loss in the same hands. He came down a little later, sitting beside me quietly. We didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "She moved." "Where?" I asked. "Into Florida with Aunt Linda." He let out a soft laugh. Funny thing is, so do I. I looked at him then, really looked at him, the lines of exhaustion softening, the guilt beginning to fade. "You did what you had to do," I said. He nodded. "We both did." For a long time, that was our rhythm, quiet healing. We went to therapy, we traveled a little, we started building our life without the shadow of someone else's expectations hanging over it. But healing isn't linear. There were nights Daniel would wake up from dreams that left him hollow. Mornings I'd catch him staring at his phone like he was waiting for a message that never came. And sometimes I wondered, had we done the right thing? Was cutting her off too harsh? But then I'd remember the look in Eleanor's eyes that night at dinner, the refusal to see me as anything but an obstacle. And I'd know we had no other choice. Love doesn't survive control. It only survives respect. Months passed. Seasons shifted. One evening, as autumn painted the trees gold, I got a call from an unknown number. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. "Rachel?" It was Linda. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Hi," I said cautiously. "I just wanted you to know that Eleanor has been sick. Nothing too serious, but it's been humbling for her. She talks about Daniel a lot." I swallowed. "Does she ever ask about me?" There was a pause. "Not directly," Linda admitted, "but she keeps the photo from your wedding on her dresser." I didn't know what to say to that. I hung up with a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, pity, something else I couldn't name. Maybe love, buried somewhere deep beneath the hurt. That night, I told Daniel about the call. He went quiet for a long time, then simply said, "I'm glad she's okay." And that was it. No grand reunion, no tears, no phone call to bridge the distance. Just quiet acceptance. Because some relationships don't need to be mended. They just need to rest. 6 months later, on our wedding anniversary, we drove to the lake again. It was cold, the sky low and gray, the kind of day that makes everything feel sharper. We sat on the same dock where we once planned our future, feet dangling over the edge. Daniel took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You know, I used to think family was about blood, but it's not. It's about who stands beside you when it's hardest to." I smiled. "Then we're doing okay." He looked out at the water, his reflection rippling beside mine. "We are," he said. Finally. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I lit a lavender candle and wrote something in my journal. Something I've been too afraid to admit until now. Eleanor didn't erase me. She tried. But what she really did was reveal me. She forced me to find my voice, my boundaries, my strength. And in losing her approval, I found myself. I closed the journal and blew out the candle. The room went dark, except for the faint glow of moonlight on the walls. Somewhere in that stillness, I felt something loosen inside me, a final thread snapping free. Not with bitterness, but with grace. Because sometimes the only way to win against the people who try to rewrite your story is to start writing your own ending. And that's exactly what I did.